Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Dental Realist podcast. I am Dr. Ryder Waldron, and we're happy to be back. We're happy to have you along with us. And tonight we're especially excited because we have a special guest. But first, let me introduce my good friends and my co-hosts, Dr. Marcus D. Neff and Dr. Troy Stevens. Troy, how's it going tonight?
Going really well, thank you. Glad that daylight savings time is in full effect, so we can be dark at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It makes me depressed.
You get to work when it's dark, and you leave work when it's dark.
Exactly.
Yeah. Marcus, how about you?
It's like 10 o'clock at night right now.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. I'm still trying to adjust to this daylight savings time and going to work in the dark and coming home in the dark. But no, things are good.
Good.
Southeast Idaho.
Good. So our topic tonight is embezzlement. It's a dirty word, but it's a topic that dentists just can't ignore nowadays. And our guest tonight is David Harris. And David is a certified fraud examiner. He's a dental embezzlement investigator and is the CEO of Prosperident, which is the world's largest firm investigating financial crimes committed against dentists. So, David, welcome to the Dental Realist podcast.
Well, thank you. Great to be here.
Okay, we're happy to have you. So, before we get into the real meat and potatoes of this topic of embezzlement, tell us a little bit about Prosperident and why you chose this career path to work with kind of the seedy underbelly of dentistry.
Well, I do get to see a side of the world that not everybody does. I'd like to tell you that I had some business plan or some idea that there would be a market in dealing with embezzlement in dental offices. I got into this completely by accident. In 1989, I had left my job. I was working as an investigator for a bank, and I was sitting at home and thinking about what would come next in my life. And the phone rang, and it was a friend of mine who was a dentist, and he said to me, "I think my front desk person's stealing from me, and I have no one else to call." And so I said, "Okay, I'll help you with that. Let me meet you tonight at your office after work, and we'll sort it out." So I went over to his office, found the embezzlement fairly quickly. What I did, in fact, was I started tossing the suspect's desk, and I quickly found her cheat book. This is the book where she was recording what she was doing. So we got her fired. My friend promised to buy me dinner that he never did. But, who says I remember things like that? Yeah, that was wow. That was my introduction to the parsimony of dentists. And so I went back to watching TV and didn't think anything more of it until 2 weeks later. And 2 weeks later, I was going into my own dentist office for an appointment. And I was about to go into the office when I looked through the glass door. And sitting there on the other side was the same woman that we fired at the other office.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, boy.
Wow.
So I ran to the nearest payphone because this was 1989. Cell phones wouldn't fit in your pocket. And I got put through to the dentist on a pretext. And I told him about the time bomb that was ticking away at his front desk. And he asked me in this very panicked voice, "What the heck do I do now?" And about 2 sentences later, he'd hired me. And by the time I got finished that job, a couple of other dentists had called me because the word was starting to get out. And 27 years later, I'm still here.
Wow.
Wow, what a beginning.
It was an interesting way to start a career. And at that point, I didn't really think that this would ever get to be as big as it is now. I mean, we now have about 14 investigators. And I should point out to your audience that the only people we work with are dentists. We don't help medical doctors or pharmacists or Walmart or anybody else. It is you guys only.
So it sounds like this is Marcus. This is a lot bigger issue than maybe anybody even realizes. I mean, we're all told as practice owners and dentists, to watch for embezzlement. We're kind of aware that that's a potential problem, but it sounds like it's a lot bigger issue than maybe we even realize.
Well, Marcus, I have good news for you. There is a 40% chance that you will go through your career without being embezzled.
Okay, well, I guess that's...
So hold on to that thought tightly.
Yeah.
Right.
That's better than 39%.
There you go. The optimist.
Way to think positive, Ryder.
Thank you. So David, what should a dentist look for if he or she suspects that somebody's embezzling? Like, what are some tip-offs?
And that's a great question, and this is a place where I think a lot of people miss the boat. And I think in broad terms there are two categories of things you could look for. The first is some kind of financial anomaly. So that might be your day-end report not matching to your bank deposit. Or it might be the monthly total of your day-ends not being the same as your month-end report. The other place that you can look is in staff behavior. And a lot of the things I read about this, and unfortunately there are a lot of people who, with the very best of intentions, write about embezzlement without really understanding it. There are a lot of people who I would call well-intentioned dabblers who write about this stuff, and unfortunately, when you see 1 or 5 embezzlements, it's very easy to derive the wrong lessons. And it's not until you've seen hundreds that really the light bulb comes on in certain things. So what you're told as a practice owner is watch your finances, and please don't take me out of context, guys. That is far from a bad idea. But the majority of embezzlement is uncovered not because of financial irregularities, but behavioral ones. So when we've got a staff member who is embezzling, the first thing is they do not want to take vacation.
They're maybe the hardest worker in the office. They want to be there early, late.
And superficially, working for you and working against you look very similar. So, this person looks like the consummate multitasker, like they're juggling 30 balls. And in fact, they are. But not all of them are ones you know about. So they will come in early, or they'll stay late, or they'll come in on Saturday to, quote, catch up. Because stealing is an activity that you really want to do when you're alone in the office.
Yeah.
Right.
They will... one thing I'll mention, and this is just a basic observation about human nature. Honest people don't have to repeatedly tell you how honest they are.
That's true.
When somebody does that, and if you think back to the last time that you bought a car, I'm sure that you bought it from the most honest car salesman in whatever town you live in, because they told you that 5 times. Okay?
Very true.
So conspicuous displays of honesty are another symptom. They do not want to cross-train anybody else to do their job. They really want to be the only person in your office who can do whatever their function is. They are very threatened by the possibility that you might obtain some kind of outside advice. A consultant, maybe your CPA becoming a little more involved in the running of your practice. They will push back hard against that.
Can I ask you a question along those lines? Do you find that CPAs pick up on stuff? Because we have our CPA reviewing our stuff all the time, kind of as a cross-check. Do you find that CPAs can pick up on stuff? Is there some trigger?
In general, they can't. And this statistic is not specific to dentistry. This is a global one. But of all the embezzlement that's been found in the United States, CPAs account for about 8% of it.
Wow.
It's a lot lower than I would think.
It's a pretty small number. They have a couple of limitations here. The first one is that, in general, your CPA is probably a pretty straight arrow, and for most of what they do, that's a really good thing. I was saying to somebody earlier today, if CPAs were dentists, they'd be prosthodontists.
Nice.
Very, very good with the detail. The problem comes in that when they try to replicate the criminal thought process, and a lot of them struggle with that. When I hire investigators, that's the biggest thing I'm looking for. I have investigators who come from all walks of dental life. I mean, I have former dentists, I have people who used to be office managers, software trainers, consultants, a lot of different things. But what differentiates the really exceptional ones from everybody else is that the exceptional ones can stand in the shoes of the criminal and say, if this is the situation I were in, this is how I would steal. So they can construct an accurate hypothesis. I find in general that CPAs really struggle with that. And I'm a CPA. I'm the only CPA at Prosperident.
Okay.
We just in general, we get lots of applications from CPAs, but in general, even if they have fraud qualifications, they struggle with that. The second thing is that in general, they can't get inside your practice management software. So what they tend to do is take the output from that software and then compare it to other things like your bank. And that means they're really seeing 20% of what they need to. The majority of stealing in dentistry happens inside the practice management software. And to your CPA, typically that's just a black box. They can take its output, but they can't see what's behind the output.
I see.
Yeah, it's true. They can't access the software, the in-office software. So therefore, if something funky's going on there, then they aren't going to be able to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and there are two ways that theft can happen from you. One is that people can steal. Money can be, or patient payments or insurance payments can be recorded in the practice management software and not deposited. Okay, the accountants will pick that up. So will you if you look at your day-end report and compare it to the bank deposit. The other kind of stealing happens when money disappears inside the software.
So how does that happen?
Okay. They make an adjustment off of a patient's chart and then take that money somehow themselves or something like that, the money we receive from them?
Patient payments or insurance payments. One thing that I wish more dentists understood was how easy it is for somebody else to cash a check payable to you. Every dentist I ever run into understands cash theft, but they all think that when there's a check payable to them that nobody else can touch it. And
I guess in my mind I'm thinking, you take that to the bank, they're going to say, well, you're not Dr. Neff, you're not Aspen Valley Family Dentistry or whatever. The teller's going to question it.
Yeah, but the first question, Marcus, is why would I deal with a teller when there's a nice ATM sitting there that's not going to ask me any questions at all?
Oh, man.
Good point.
So there aren't any personal checks at the bank level to check that when they deliver, when they pick it up?
You guys and your peers have no idea how automated the banking system is. Your check is read by a machine. And, the machine really focuses on the amount and the stuff in funny letters at the very bottom of the check, which tells the bank how to clear that check, and not much else.
The routing number and all that?
Yeah, tells it which Federal Reserve District and things like that. The banks have made a business decision, and the business decision they've made is that the majority of checks that go through our clearing system are uncontested and legitimate. And it is not worth our while to have humans look at all the checks to deal with the fraction of 1% that fall into dispute.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, on their part.
The second thing is, and a lot of your peers really underestimate the determination and the smarts that embezzlers bring to the problem. And when you guys try to cash a check payable to some third party, you go to the teller and you ask if you can do it.
Yeah.
When an embezzler does it, they go at that quite differently. And it could be anything from opening a bank account in your name to doing some funny stuff with how the back of the check is endorsed so that that check becomes cashable. But I will tell you that we see it every day.
Wow.
And along the same lines, guys, it is not that hard to intercept other forms of payment as well, like credit card payments, like electronic funds transfers to your account. Any form of payment to you can be adulterated.
Well, I know, like, nowadays you can pretty much swipe a credit card on your iPhone if you want to. I mean, is that... I don't want to give any tips out to people who may be doing this, but that seems like that could be a little bit of a problem nowadays. I mean, somebody could be swiping a credit card in your name onto their phone, going into their account.
Yeah, or, you know, if a little less sophisticated version, you know, that merchant terminal thing in your office that takes the credit card payments.
Yeah.
I just go get my own.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, if I want patient money to go into my account, I use my terminal.
Wow, seems pretty brazen.
Wow, yeah.
Maybe our eyes are being opened here.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, that's you know, that's why we do this.
Yeah.
A lot of you know, I see a lot of articles written by people, and again, I'm back to the well-intentioned dabblers, and the articles have titles like 10 things you can do to prevent embezzlement in your office.
Mm-hmm.
And what people are doing here is they're making the wrong assumption. You know, if I work for you and I've gotten to the point where I've decided that stealing from you is okay, and I run into a roadblock, which is that you've set up your procedures in a certain way, and it defeats my first plan for how to steal from you. What do you think I do next? I mean, does that convert me into an honest person? Do I go home and join the church choir and give up my concept of stealing from you? Or
They go to step 2.
Yeah, do I stay awake for another night and try to figure out a way around this problem? I mean, let me give you an example. A lot of people will, in their list of 10 or 8 or 12 things to, quote, prevent embezzlement, will say, everybody needs their own password in your software, and those passwords need to have the correct authority levels. In other words, if I'm a person doing recall phone calls for you, I don't need the ability to write off patient balances. And again, don't take me out of context. That is really good advice. However, from the perspective of the embezzler, if my password won't do the things it needs to for me to steal, what do you think my response is?
I'll find somebody else's password that can.
I need somebody else's password. And the best password to get, by the way, guys, is yours. Because inevitably the doctor's password can do everything. I mean, you just logically wouldn't restrict yourself.
Right.
So it's the best one to get, and typically it's the easiest one to get because of anybody in the office, you probably type with the fewest fingers. So, you know, if I watch you log in 2 or 3 times, I probably know what your password is.
Yeah.
Good point.
That's true.
So, you know, it's not a bad idea, but that isn't going to dissuade the thief for very long. It's simply a little speed bump on the embezzlement highway.
Yeah, hearing you talk about these things, it makes me think. You know, in my mind, I figured embezzlement began maybe as more of a crime of opportunity, and it sounds to me more like it's typically not so much a crime of opportunity. It's a well planned, thought out endeavor.
It is not, and crime of opportunity is kind of a little bit of a misleading term. It's not an impulsive crime.
Sure.
It is planned. Now,
it's not some
unquestionably
$20 bill sitting in the drawer. I'm going to take it.
Yeah, I'm sure there is some of that, but the majority of embezzlement we see, and certainly the big dollar stuff, and we can talk about how much money people steal in a minute, but the majority of big embezzlement is well planned and executed by somebody who knows you really well and uses that knowledge in the furtherance of their crime. In fact, it may even go beyond knowing you to manipulating you. We saw one a little while ago. This was a female practitioner, and she had an activity with her kids on Thursday nights. So she had to be out of the office at 5 o'clock on Thursdays. What the embezzler did was saved up all the emergency patients who came in from Monday to Wednesday and put them all in the book on Thursday. So she did her best to make sure the doctor was running behind on Thursdays, which meant that the poor gal would be sprinting to her car at 5 o'clock, and the absolute last thing she would be thinking about was, okay, but before I leave the office, I have to check the day-end report for today.
Oh, my gosh.
Okay, so all the stealing happened on Thursdays. The office was closed on Fridays. And the first chance, really, that the doctor would have to look at the Thursday stuff was on Monday. Well, let me ask you a basic question. How much on Monday do you remember about what happened in your office on the previous Thursday?
Yeah, not much, usually.
Not much. So, the embezzler was beyond simply observing her environment and was controlling it.
Wow.
Unreal. Okay. This is a very unequal battle because they know you like a book. The typical embezzlers work for you for 5 or more years when they start stealing. And the typical amount they steal is between 3 and 5% of your collections each month, although, we certainly see some outliers in both directions, and they typically get away with more than $100,000 before they get caught.
My gosh.
Okay. That's the average embezzler. We have in our office a wall called the $1 Million Club, and on it sit pictures of embezzlers who have gotten away with more than $1 million. There are 7 of them.
Wow.
Wow. That's insane.
The $500,000 club is a lot more populous, but to get to that exclusive turf where somebody steals $1 million undetected, you're pretty good.
So, do the dentists ever get? I mean, if they're losing $1 million, do they ever get that money back? Is there any way for them to get that money back, or even a percentage of it back?
Everybody gets some back,
okay,
and relatively few get it all back. Broadly speaking, there are 3 places you can get money back if you're a victim. The first is the embezzler, but I doubt I'd surprise you guys if I said, most thieves are stealing it. Most thieves are spending it at least as quickly as they're stealing it.
Sure. Right.
In general, it's not like they're buying Apple stock with it when it's $80 and riding it to $400, and they're sitting there with $2 million in their 401k. Most thieves are spending the money conspicuously. So they're buying luxury stuff with it. The second place you can get money back is from what's called employee dishonesty insurance. So this is part of your business insurance coverage. The amount that the typical dentist who we see has of this coverage is a very pitiful $25,000. And one thing I would encourage your audience to do is to talk to their agent. So this is the policy that's sold to them by like State Farm or Farmers or somebody like that. Go talk to their agent. Ask about getting that increased. And typically for very little money each month, they can get it bumped up to $75,000 or $100,000, which is a lot better number. The third place that you can get money back, which is kind of fact-specific, is if somebody is cashing checks payable to you, we can go after their bank.
Oh, wow.
Because the banks have a responsibility not to let that happen. And as I say, they've made a business decision that the cure is worse than the disease. That we don't see that in every case. People steal from you for 2 reasons, and I call them needy and greedy thieves. So needy thieves have something going on in their life that puts their finances out of kilter. Maybe it's a divorce, maybe it's some kind of addiction, but there's something going on that causes more money to go out each month than their salary, and they steal and make up the difference. So they're using the money to buy groceries and pay the mortgage. The greedy thieves, the other group, are a little bit different. They really feel underappreciated by you. They look at you as kind of this affable moron with good hands. And in their eyes, the only reason you're successful is because of them. And they wait for you to come along to them and say, oh, Susie, I've been really stupid. I'm going to double your salary starting tomorrow. I mean, they actually believe that's going to happen. And they wait for that, and they wait, and they wait, and finally they realize that you're never going to do that, and really what they have to look forward to for the rest of their life is cost of living. And then they steal. So when these people steal, it's a little bit different. They spend the money on luxury items. We saw one who chartered a plane and took 7 of her girlfriends to New York on a shopping weekend.
That's a nice friend.
Yeah, no kidding.
The backstory was, these folks had all gone to high school together. The backstory was that the others all made more money, or they had husbands who made more money, and this was the embezzler's way of kind of waving her flag and saying, you know what, guys, I'm doing okay too. We wrapped up a case a little while ago where the embezzler had a son who was playing very high level soccer, and she was a single mom, and on what she made, there was just no possible way she could afford, what was probably a $4,000 to $6,000 a month soccer addiction.
Oh my gosh!
My gosh, yeah.
So she stole.
Wow.
Now that wasn't the only thing she did with the money, but it was a significant part of it.
I would imagine those who embezzle are typically front office related staff. I don't imagine much embezzling happens from dental assistants, hygienists, but I could be wrong. Is that
oh boy,
accurate?
have I got news for you? I will agree with you that the majority of embezzlement happens at the front desk, but I don't know if you guys have ever looked on eBay for dental equipment.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's lots of it there. Some of it's new in the plastic bags, and it's selling for 2/3 or half of what Henry Schein would sell it for.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that stuff gets on eBay?
That's a good point right there.
Wow.
I've actually joked around with my staff about that. When, a cotton plier or something goes missing from one of our cassettes, I'll say, oh, yeah, somebody's selling stuff on eBay, aren't they? And, we're just kind of ha-ha joking around about it. But, man, I'm going to have to look into that really good.
The next time you say that, you won't be ha-ha now.
Some of it's gray market stuff that, has fallen off the truck somewhere between China and Utah. And some of it is from staff who are in charge of ordering, and you're getting new handpieces for your office, and they get an extra one and sell it.
Wow.
The other thing I'll mention is that a lot of dentists have this thing that I think of as the gold jar.
Yeah, scrap metal, the crowns you cut off, yeah.
Well, nobody's watching that.
That's a good point.
So, and for that matter, when dental offices computerized 20 years ago, there was a terminal at the front desk, and terminals in the offertories just weren't something anybody did. But now everybody's got terminal in every offertory, so that really the back office staff have exactly the same opportunity as anybody else to steal.
Yeah, that's true.
Good point.
Wow.
Yeah.
The only person you can truly trust is your mother.
Well, you haven't met my mother.
Ryder, I hope your mom doesn't listen to this podcast.
I hope she's not listening.
No, I do trust my mother.
Well, I don't trust anybody now.
Good, then my job is done.
Very good.
Well,
I guess you do have to go into this with just a little bit of skepticism. I mean, you can't just blanket trust anybody. I mean, you know what? I don't want to be somebody who's always looking over everybody's shoulder trying to catch them doing something wrong. But you really probably do need to keep a little bit of skepticism and trust but verify type of thing.
I quote Ronald Reagan a lot on that one. It's interesting the way that humans want to deal with the issue of trust. And we will describe people in a very binary sense about trust. Either you can trust them or you can't trust them, right? We break the world down with trust in a black and white. The other thing is, in an interpersonal relationship, we want to establish very early on whether somebody is in that black or white, and then we don't ever want to revisit it again. So it's human nature that we want to decide if we can trust somebody, and once we've made that decision, it's a forever kind of thing, and that makes no sense. The vast majority of embezzlers who we see are longtime employees. I'm pretty sure that at the time they were hired, they had no plan to embezzle. And then sometime between then and now, it's changed. So I guess I have a couple of messages. The first one is that we have to think of trust as a moving concept and not a static one. And that we have to more or less continuously be reevaluating our decision to trust people.
Sure.
The second place where I see trust horribly misplaced is when dentists hire people. And let me just ask you guys, I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but let me ask you a really basic question. When you hire people, do you check their photo ID?
No, I don't. No.
Okay. So, and you're no different than most other dentists. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense now.
I mean, you have really no idea who somebody is who's working with you other than who they say they are.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Never even crossed my mind, to be honest with you, until right now.
Because you guys are healers. You know, I have yet to meet a dentist who got into dentistry out of a burning desire to be a small business owner. That is just a horrible curse that accompanies the privilege of looking after people's dental health.
Yeah,
so you're all reluctant business owners. You all hate hiring.
That is true.
And you will not do anything to prolong it. And let me be specific on this. It makes absolutely no sense to me that I cannot get a $12 an hour job with UPS delivering parcels without a drug test, and yet I will bet that every single employee in every one of your offices got there without having to pee in a bottle.
Yeah.
Yep, you're exactly right.
And yet they're working in an environment where you have prescription pads sitting there, where you have confidential HIPAA-protected information all over the place. And honestly, you guys have no sweet clue whether somebody working for you is a drug addict.
Yeah.
No. I've had a couple that I found out, actually, honestly, after they've left the office, I have found out that they had a problem. And that bothered me because it kind of concerned me because my staff hadn't told me. You know, they knew something was going on, and they never told me that the particular person had trouble.
Well,
not that she was taking anything from the office. She was using stuff, you know, outside the office, of course, but not you know, writing prescriptions or anything like that. But, you know, still, you know, something that could have potentially affected her work and, you know, her ability to perform.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to be getting nitrous sedation from a doctor whose assistant who's monitoring me is high this morning.
Yeah, no
right.
kidding.
No, exactly.
But my point again is that dentists as a group are altruistic, trusting people. And a less nice description for the same thing is suckers. You know, you guys relate to each other clinically in such an altruistic way. I mean, if you're a general dentist and you send a patient to an orthodontist for assessment and the orthodontist writes you back and says, I think this patient could benefit from treatment, you guys are 100% entitled to believe that recommendation is made on based on what's in the patient's best interest and not the orthodontist. That's the code that you have.
Yeah.
And it serves you really well in a clinical sense, but as soon as you step out of that little bubble, it's like an anchor around your neck. And embezzlers love you guys because you are the ultimate altruists, and you believe what people tell you.
Yeah, that is true. And so while we're talking about hiring people, I just hired a hygienist about 2 months ago, and usually when I don't know if Troy and Mark is the same way, but usually when I'm interviewing someone, obviously you want their clinical skills to be up to par, but I want to know that their personality is going to mesh with mine, that they're, a team player and willing to work hard, they're going to get along with the patients. But are there things to look for or questions that we could ask, behaviors that we could look for to see if somebody would be a possible embezzlement risk?
Well, let's step back to the basics. How do you know for sure that person is entitled to practice dental hygiene in your state?
Well, you check their license.
Check the license. Yep, they have a license.
Okay, and you check the paper copy of the license that they give you, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And nothing else usually.
Back in the days when I broke the law, which was when I was in my teens, forgery was a very skilled profession. I mean, you had to use millions of dollars of equipment, and you had to use a lot of technical skill. Well, my son, who's in 9th grade, his school a couple of years ago stopped sending report cards home with kids. Remember how we used to get report cards when we were growing up? The school would put it in an envelope. You would bring it home to your parents. They'd open it. In your case, they'd probably pat you on the back and say, "Good job." In my case, it was a little different. Okay, my son's school stopped that, and the reason they stopped that was that what the 8th and 9th graders were doing was they were opening the report cards themselves, and if they didn't like the one the school gave them, they sat down at the computer that's in every house with the laser printer and all the graphics available on the internet, and they just make their own.
I had a friend do that in about 7th grade, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a huge shift. There's been a huge shift in how easy it is to forge documents. And yet, as a society, we still place a whole lot of reliance on paper. So if somebody shows up with a copy of their hygiene diploma and a copy of their license from the Utah Board of Dental Examiners, as far as you're concerned, they're good to pick up a scaler in your office. All I see is somebody who could easily have made those things with stuff that's probably already sitting in their house. So to me, the only way to be sure that person is licensed to practice is to call the state board and say, is this person okay to practice? And I'm assuming, of course, that you've already checked their photo ID, so you know who this person really is.
Well, and that makes perfect sense.
So let's start there. I think a lot of people do the interview process very poorly. And this is a little bit beyond spotting embezzlers, and really we're talking now about how to get the right people in your office. The first mistake I see dentists make when they interview is that they ask questions to which there is an obvious answer. So they say, you ask somebody, well, do you mind working evenings? And if I'm sitting there in the interview and I want the job, the answer is pretty obvious.
Yeah.
No, of course I don't mind. Then you hire me. Then you start finding out what I didn't tell you, which is, well, okay, but I can't work Thursday evenings, and every second Wednesday I can't. Okay, but as a job seeker, my logic is I'll cross that bridge later, and in the meantime, I want you to turn all the other candidates away and give me the job, and then we can resolve my issues. The second mistake that dentists make is they ask questions to which there's a coachable answer. And a question I hear a lot of people ask is, give me your strengths and your weaknesses. Anybody who's been coached on interviewing knows that the weaknesses they should give you are really ones that you're going to view as hidden strengths. So my weakness is that I am a total perfectionist, and I will not leave the office at night until my work is perfect. That's my weakness. And you guys will look at that and say, great, that's the person I want.
Yeah.
Okay. When you're interviewing people, and again, we've moved a little bit beyond purely talking about embezzlement, give them role-play questions. Give somebody a situation that you encounter in the office and say, okay, what would you do here? What would you say to the patient when they said this? Obviously, you have to temper this a little bit with the knowledge level that somebody's bringing in. In other words, if you're hiring somebody from outside dentistry, they're going to give different answers to these questions than somebody who's worked in a dental office for 20 years.
Yeah.
True.
So, you have to factor that into your evaluation. But that's your best preview of how somebody's going to perform on the job. Because if they can't answer a sort of pressure question in that case, they're never going to be able to do it in a real life work situation. So role play is your friend here.
Makes sense.
The other thing that you can do, and this is not specifically part of the interview, but part of the hiring process, is that a lot of, again, it's back to accepting what people say at face value and not checking it out. I have a very simple rule. When I'm hiring somebody, I want to talk to all employers they've had in the last 5 years. If you adopt that rule, the way that most people will then implement it, which is where the flaw comes in, is they will take somebody's resume and they will call the phone numbers on that resume and they will talk to those people. Disposable cell phones are really cheap. So we've seen cases where embezzlers with a fair amount of baggage got jobs, and the way that they got the job was they put on the resume the phone number of their former employer that was a disposable cell phone that somebody like their aunt was holding on to.
Wow.
So you think you're talking to a former employer, you're talking to a relative, the relative gives a great reference, the embezzler gets a job, and eventually I get called.
So what's the solution to that? To look up, I usually check references, but I know a lot of dentists don't check references, and so
a lot of dentists don't check references at all. You've got to do that, and you have to do it smartly. So smartly is I get the phone number independently. You know, I go to my favorite online search engine and phone it. So if somebody says that they work for Dr. Waldron, I know I'm actually talking to Dr. Waldron and not somebody pretending to be Dr. Waldron. Then when I get you on the phone, Ryder, I've got to ask you some rather specific questions. For example, I want to know from you the exact start date and the exact end date of that employee. Okay, let's say that I work for Ryder for 3 years, and either I'm not stealing or I'm stealing and I don't get caught. And then I leave Ryder's office and I go to work for Marcus, and I work there for 6 months, and he catches me with my hand in the till and fires me. And now I'm applying to Troy. What I don't want is I don't want Troy phoning Marcus. I'm okay with Troy phoning Ryder because as far as Ryder's concerned, I'm good. So I will do things like play with the dates when on my resume that I say that I work for people, and if I do that properly, then Marcus's job, the job I had with Marcus, just disappears. So the way you catch me at that is Troy's got to ask Ryder what was the start date and what was the end date. And he will see that they're different from what I said on my resume. And the next thing Troy should say to Ryder is, okay, who did David work for before he worked for you? And when he left you, where did he go? Because most times in dentistry, we know those things. Sure. So Ryder says to Troy, well, when David left me, he went to work for Marcus. And Troy says, that's interesting because I don't see Marcus on the resume anywhere. Let me call him. And at that point, Troy's getting an earful from Marcus, and of course I don't get the job. The other thing that is relatively easy to fool you guys is when somebody says, please don't call my current employer because he doesn't know I'm leaving.
Yeah, we do hear that a fair amount.
Yeah.
I've heard that.
Two possibilities. One is that this is a legitimate request, and the other possibility is that I actually got fired by that employer 2 weeks ago, and this is my way of preventing you from having a conversation with an unhappy employer. So how do you handle that? The answer is you say to somebody who says that to you, okay, I understand that completely, and here's what we're going to do. We will complete the rest of the screening process, and if you are our chosen candidate, then I will give you a written offer of employment, that lays out salary and vacation, all the terms and conditions, and there will be just simply one requirement before you get the job, and the requirement is that I have a conversation with your current employer, because at that point, you know what the deal is with me, and if you want it, you've got to tell them that you're leaving anyway.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what this does, it's a great way of doing differential diagnosis, because if I know that I'm not going to get a good reference from that person because they just fired me, and I know that the only way I can get a job with you is for you to have a conversation with them, then I can see the brick wall that I'm going to hit here. So there's no way that I'm going to go through the rest of the screening process, like the drug test and the criminal records check and things that you're going to do. And at the end of that, of course, I can't possibly get the job. So I'm just going to bail from the process now. So it's telling somebody that is a great way to screen whether this is a legitimate request or they're concealing something.
Well, that's it. That's it. I'm just like speechless now.
Yeah, that's good information right there.
The other thing, sorry, one more thing before we go on. The other question you should ask every former employer you speak with, and I keep it very unambiguous, is to say to them, if you had a job that person was qualified for, and if they were available, would you rehire them? Okay? We've all fired somebody for performance. We've all been told by our attorney that you have to be really careful what you say. And you probably shouldn't say anything bad about the person. Well, this is your way of probing that. And if you get anything other than an enthusiastic yes about a certain employee to that question, move on. Hire somebody else.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Let's turn it around as well, because this is a great way to give a job reference. So if you get a call about somebody you fired, the best way to handle it, I think, is to say to the person calling you, I will confirm their dates of employment and duties, and I'm only going to answer one other question. And that question is, would you rehire them? So at that point, whoever's calling you is going to say, all right, I'll play your stupid game. Would you rehire that person? And your answer is, well, since you asked, not in 100 million years. You haven't said anything about their behavior. You haven't said that person stole from me or that was a hygienist who used the same Profi cup all morning. That one always gets the reaction. What you said is, under no circumstances would that person be welcome back in my office. And that's code for they did something really bad and I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, that's a good question to ask.
It's a good question to ask, and as I say, if you're trying to give a reference on somebody, that's a great way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty much all the reference you would need. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. That would narrow it down right there.
Although I saw a case where somebody was fired for embezzlement, the new employer called the old employer said that, and the new employer hired them anyway.
Wow.
And I said to the old employer, sometimes you just have to let Darwin do his work.
Right, yeah. Yep.
There are just some people who got through dental school who shouldn't have, and obviously we're talking to one, so let's just let whatever happens next happen.
Wow.
That's amazing.
So can you not say anything negative about it? Say somebody embezzled from you and somebody calls to get a reference. Are you legally bound to not say that they stole from me or they lied on a time card or something like that? What are the rules there?
You have to be really careful doing that.
Okay.
And here's the problem. The Constitution entitles people to the presumption of
innocence.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So if you say to another employer, that person stole from me, and let's say when that matter gets to court, they get acquitted. Now you've made a statement that with the benefit of hindsight, which, as you know, is a relatively exact science, with the benefit of hindsight, you made a false statement.
Yeah,
because
then they're in trouble.
When the court acquits them, they didn't do it. And then you could get in trouble. So a lot safer way is simply to say, I'm not going to talk about performance. I'm simply going to say that when you ask me, I'm simply going to say that hell would freeze over before I'd hire that employee again.
Just make it very clear.
Yeah. It should be pretty emphatic.
All right, that's better. That makes sense.
So, are all embezzlement cases turned over to authorities, to police?
I wish they were. For a lot of reasons, there are some embezzlement cases that never go to police. one of the causes, I think, in general, is that the dentist is doing something that is improper, and there's a little bit of a concept that the embezzler is holding a get out of jail free card. So let's say one of the funniest calls I ever got was from an orthodontist who practiced with another guy. And the two of them had this arrangement with each other where when cash payments came in, they took them, they put them in their pocket, and they didn't report them to the IRS. The call that I got from one of the orthodontists said, I think my partner's stealing more than I am.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I'm trying here to keep a straight face and have a civil conversation with the man. He was right, but...
He was right. The other guy was stealing more?
Yeah, he was. He was. But that's a case that's never going to see a police department.
Sure.
If you are playing games, if you are not collecting co-pays like you're supposed to, or to use an example I have seen in other cases, if you're having an extramarital affair with the embezzler.
Oh, wow.
That's happened?
That happens a lot.
Complicates the matter. My goodness.
If somebody is stealing from you, one of the ways they get immunity is they say, gee, doctor, have you been working out? Your arm muscles look really great.
Oh, wow.
It's bizarre. Wow.
So there are lots of things you could do that compromise you. And, in the case of that extramarital affair, the embezzler actually said to me, when the doctor's thinking about what to do about this, he should give a little bit of thought to what a divorce might cost him.
Oh, my gosh.
And, of course, she walked out the door untouched.
Wow. Wow, that is interesting.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I must live in a bubble because I don't even think I have of this stuff. I just...
Now your eyes are open.
I want to go to work and then leave, kind of thing.
And,
yeah, you do.
Wow, that's interesting.
That's a challenge. Now, if you did have a case on someone, of course, of embezzlement, there is legal ramifications for this, correct?
Absolutely. In every state in the United States, stealing is against the law.
Right.
The thing that people don't necessarily understand, though, a couple of things they don't understand about this. The first is that they go to the police very early in the process, far too early, in fact, and they expect the police department to come in and investigate and then to prosecute. And what people don't think of is that it really is not the responsibility of the police department to determine what was stolen from you. That's your job. Picture the conversation where you phone your local police department on a Friday night and you say, I think somebody stole my car. And the police say, sorry to hear about that, doctor. What's the make and model? And you say, I think it's a Mercedes, but it might be a Ford. And the police say, okay, what color's the car? And you say, I don't know, it's some dark color. What the police are going to tell you is, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a taxi home, sober up, and in the morning, if you still can't find your car, call us back.
Exactly.
We can all chuckle about that, but you got to understand, embezzlement is a fairly technical crime, and the investigation of it requires a lot of skill, and it is well beyond your local police department. To crawl inside your practice management software in an industry they really don't understand at all and say, okay, I know exactly what happened. I mean, they need somebody to do that for them. So a lot of people call the police really early on in the process, and the police start asking them questions that they just can't answer. The other thing is that police departments hate files that are open for a long time with no progress. So calling the police early is a mistake. The time to call them is once investigation's been done for you, you have a report in your hand, and you can go to the police and say, okay, here's what happened.
Speaking of, you brought up dental management software. There's a few of them out there that people use. Do you find that one is more susceptible to maybe not getting things, the T's to cross and the I's to dot as good as the others, or is that doesn't play into this?
Really not a factor. I can steal in any software. And when you think about how embezzlement happens, for the most part, it is abuse of legitimate functions. So every software has the ability to adjust a patient's balance, because you have to do it every time. If you take PPO patients, that gets abused. Software has the ability to do a lot of things that are put there by the designers because offices need them. And what the embezzler does is really see how to turn that into opportunity. So you can steal in any software. I will say that there is practice management software that keeps a better audit trail. Some keeps a better audit trail than others. I personally, at least for embezzlement, kind of like cloud software because it's harder to destroy evidence. And one thing that people don't always think about is that when you paint a thief into a corner, they start thinking pretty fast about how they can protect themselves, and the easiest way to do that is destroy the evidence, and the evidence just happens to be the data, the very valuable data in your practice management software.
That's why Tom Brady destroyed his cell phone.
Yeah, many years ago, I got a call from a dentist who had some embezzlement concerns, and we talked for about 15 minutes. And at the end of that 15 minutes, he decided he could save a little bit of money if he did his own kind of do-it-yourself investigation. What he ended up doing, and it's very easy to do if you're kind of a newbie at this, is that he tipped the embezzler off to the fact that she was about to get caught. And her response to that was to come back that night and burn down his office.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, wow.
So he said to me after that, he said that was a bit of a false economy. But his instinct, and honestly, I see a lot of you guys who, when your compressor breaks, go in and start pulling it apart. His logic was that that should work for embezzlement as well. Wow. And of course, he didn't know what he didn't know. He just, he made it. He took a medium-sized problem and turned it into a massive one.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
I can't even believe it's crazy.
It gets worse. There was a woman just outside Baltimore, Maryland, in 2012 who pled guilty to murdering the dentist from whom she'd been embezzling.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah, his name was Dr. Albert Rowe. She was stealing from him, and she thought she was going to get caught. Shantae Joyner Hickman is her name, for what it's worth. And so she went back to the office one night when she knew Dr. Rowe would be there. She brought her thug cousin with her for some muscle. And the two of them took Dr. Rowe, dragged him into the bathroom in the office, and beat him to death.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, and if I need to make this story any worse, the amount embezzled was $17,000.
Oh, my gosh.
So Shantae was ratted on her cousin and was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and her cousin, Dante Jeter, received a 40-year sentence.
Oh, my gosh. For $17,000.
Yeah, none of which helps Dr. Rowe's family.
Yeah. Wow.
Right.
That's terrible. Well, so, usually, like you said, when dentists are firing someone, it's because of a performance issue or something like that. And a lot of times there's proof of this. And I've had friends that had fired somebody, but let them stay on for 2 weeks, and that person ends up collecting unemployment insurance or unemployment payments because the state will say that, well, if it was such a bad offense, you should have fired them, terminated on the spot. But with embezzlement, there, like you said, there might not be a lot of proof right at first. So what's the steps to terminate somebody? You can't just say, well, you messed up on a patient or something like that is obvious. There's some sort of proof that needs to be shown. So what's the process for firing someone for embezzlement?
Well, the first thing is that the majority of states, I think 37 of them, in fact, are what are called employment at will states. So in those states, you don't need a reason. You can terminate somebody simply because you don't want them around anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, Idaho is one of those.
Unless they're what's called a protected class employee. So for most terminations, you don't actually need a reason. If you are in a place that is not an employment at will state, then I have a couple of recommendations. First of all, you need expert help, and this goes a little bit beyond my capabilities. I mean, you need somebody who deals specifically with HR in that state, and there are a couple of really excellent dental HR companies out there, and I would tend to go to one of them. The second thing is when you give the reason, you never say that you stole the money. What you say is that money that you had custody of is unaccounted for.
Okay.
Which is far less accusatory because you simply said, I don't know where it went, but you had custody of it.
Okay.
So there's a way to do this, and again, you really need expert help with that. It just is not a do-it-yourself kind of job.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of patients or a lot of people, will work on their cars. I usually take mine to a mechanic, and if I hear of somebody working, I had a patient that glued in a tooth on his own denture this week. I don't recommend that. So doing your own fraud investigation should probably be left up to the experts also, I guess is what you're saying.
There are certain things I will do on my car, and there are certain things I will not touch. I will not touch brakes because, they're kind of a mission critical system in the car, and they're the thing that stopped me from plowing into the school bus.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll happily tinker with a lot of things, but brakes aren't one of them. And unfortunately, there are a lot of dentists who are real do-it-yourselfers, and it probably serves them well in a lot of cases. But this is a case where, first of all, there's a lot of misinformation, and secondly, a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. You mentioned an interesting point, though, about not firing an embezzler. And I had a conversation with a dentist today. It was very clear to me in the conversation that this person was stealing, and they're still in the office. The dentist had put them on what he referred to as modified duties. And I said to him, I think you're making a colossal mistake. You have somebody who obviously wants to steal from you, who has been able to rationalize that it's okay, and your logic is that if I just take them off the front desk, I'm fine. No, you have somebody who really wants to steal from you, and now they just have to figure out another way how.
And you kind of, in a way, told them it's okay because I'm not going to fire you over it.
That's right.
Wow, good point.
Which kind of empowers the employee to know they could probably get away with more than maybe they think they can. Like, this guy isn't going to fire me for anything.
At a minimum, they're certainly looking to do it. And do you want an employee who is in that position? The way I talked to this guy about it was I told him about a conversation that Winston Churchill, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, was supposed to have had with a woman, and he asked this woman if she would sleep with him for £1 million. There's about $2.5 million. And she said, of course. And then Churchill said to her, how about 20 pounds? And the woman looked at him and said, what do you think I am, a prostitute? His answer was, we've already established that, madam. What we're now doing is haggling over the price.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, well, this has been awesome, David. We don't want to keep you up too late because it's already getting close to like 11 o'clock in Nova Scotia. But why don't you tell everybody where they can get in contact with you? And tell them about your website. I was on your website today and I was checking out your Hall of Shame, and that was awesome. I had to look through there just to make sure I didn't know anybody, and I didn't, luckily. But just tell everybody where they can get in contact with you and where to check out your Hall of Shame and everything else.
All right. Our website, the email or the address of our website is pretty easy to remember. It's www.dentalembezzlement.com. And I know that your audience are obviously literate people, but I'll mention that there are 2 Z's in embezzlement. If somebody wants to phone us, our toll-free number is 888-398-2327.
Okay.
And if somebody wants to email me directly, the same URL, my email is david@dentalembezzlement.com. You mentioned our Hall of Shame. Yeah, that's something that gets a lot of attention and a lot of traffic. We now profile over 350 embezzlers in our Hall of Shame.
Unreal.
So we've got their pictures, we've got what state they lived in, how much money they stole, if that's been determined, what happened to them, in other words, how much time they spent in jail. It's all there. And yes, I agree. Before you hire somebody, you should really have a look through there and just make sure that their picture isn't
For sure.
At the very least, to do that, yeah.
Yeah, I had somebody email me not that long ago who said, I was about to hire somebody, and I saw their picture in your Hall of Shame.
Oh, my gosh. Hopefully they didn't hire him.
No, they didn't.
Good.
Well, David, we really, really appreciate you being on with us. I think it's definitely opened my eyes, and I'm sure it's opened a lot of our listeners' eyes. Marcus, why don't you tell everybody where they can get in touch with us?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We're on Twitter @Dental Realist. You can find us on Facebook also. Send us any questions, any comments, any suggestions for future shows to dentalrealist@gmail.com. And we really appreciate all of you for listening to our podcast. We think this will be a great help to you and your practice.
Yeah, this has been great, and this is a topic we could probably go all night talking about some. I could go all night listening to some of these stories. These are just totally entertaining, probably for the wrong reasons, but they really are. So we want to thank David Harris for being on with us tonight. This has been episode 17, and we will see you on episode 18 of the Dental Realist Podcast next time. Thanks a lot.